All right. I'm going to try a video about Conor here. And the question I want to ask, feel free to comment. Should Conor fight in the UFC again? Now, I guess to be fair with that, we need to provide perspective. Whose perspective are we asking that question from? And we are going to say it is from Conor's perspective. So Conor, if you want to benefit Conor's life further because you're Conor, should you fight in the UFC again? You know, let's go over my thoughts with this. The idea that's brought me to make this video, Conor has right now currently I haven't looked in to figure out if this is authentic or if it's a gimmick or what's going on. But a week ago, maybe a little more, Conor tweeted out that he's in talks with some family in Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia to fight Logan Paul in a boxing match. Now, Logan Paul is the guy who fought Floyd and fought Dylan Dennis. Not the Paul that fought Mike Tyson and Anderson Silva and Ben Askren. Not that one. The one that's currently in the WWE, from my understanding. Logan Paul is not as good of a boxer as Jake Paul. It's not even close. The reason I say I don't know if that's really happening or not is because I've seen Conor put out it was going to be for $250 million. I've seen Chael say there's no possible way this could happen, but I guess he's made like 5 videos about it now because people keep saying, yo, this really is happening and the UFC is involved in the talks. I don't know if they are or not. I haven't seen anything from Dana confirming it, but I haven't gone looking to see if I can find something from Dana confirming it. But if Conor is going to fight anywhere, the UFC will be involved in negotiations. So that's that. But the reason I asked should Conor fight in the UFC again is let's look at what happens first let's go over the fact that Conor, who hasn't fought in the UFC since I don't know when. Was Cowboy the last fight? No, it was Dustin. He fought Dustin. And broke his leg. So it was after Cowboy. But it's been years now. Even with that gap of the years, and there were other gaps of years, hypothetically, if this rumor is right, he is still valued at $250 million to be seen to compete in a combat sporting event. If Conor were to come back and compete in the UFC, now mind you, when he was making his first comeback, like from boxing, he tried to fight Diego Sanchez. I feel like there was someone else, and then he got Donald Cerrone. All of which are not at the caliber we viewed Conor at. Like it was like a tune-up fight is what they would call it in boxing. But we don't do that in the UFC. So I felt like Conor was perceiving a decline in his ability or something. Or he's being smart and being like, let's get the easy win. He gets out there with Dustin and loses. Gets out there with Dustin again and loses. Then we don't see him anymore. There's no denying that age is going to catch up with someone. A lot of people debate the ring rust. But if Conor were to go out there again, let's say Conor goes out there at 170. I think I saw something about him saying Sean Strickland would be fun, but that'd be 185. Who would be let's just say Colby. I've been talking about Colby. Let's say Conor comes back and goes in at 170 and fights Colby Covington. and gets laid on like Khabib, or just outstruck for 3 or 4 rounds and loses. And it's not an entertaining fight. Does Conor then retain the value that he currently has across the world? Whether it's as a advertiser for a drink, a food, a brand, a service, or as a competitor doing boxing, or as a coach teaching any form of striking or fighting, or as a training partner to help a fighter get ready for their camp. If he doesn't go out and win, he could be taking a huge financial blow, if that makes sense. So he's expressed that he wants to compete in BKFC. I feel like he has 2 fights left in his UFC contract, though I could be mistaken. And I don't believe he's avoiding them. Now, last summer I got a bunch of views and I got a bunch of people in comments because I was saying Conor was in some legal trouble and that's why he's not fighting. Then that whole rape, sexual assault case, played out and everything. And what do you know? I knew what I was talking about. Conor wants to complete his contract as quickly as possible. But I think right now, it's no longer on Conor's side of why he's not fighting. I think he had the hold up back in the fall because he was like, I got to focus on this case. I got to get with my lawyers. I got to stay with my lawyers. I can't risk whatever. I don't know what specific detail it was. But it clearly seems that that's that or the addiction where he couldn't put coke down. But I think it had more to do with legality. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So if Conor... and Conor doesn't... I don't feel like Conor is the one being like, hey, I can't fight right now or postponing it now. I think it's the UFC. And I think it's because there are contract negotiations with ESPN or Netflix or whoever it may be. And when you have the ability to put a Conor fight like on the table, like you can be like, hey, we'll be able to do this Conor fight. These are the last numbers the Conor fights did. It gives you more leverage. So I think that's what's going on right now. But the longer they wait, I don't think that's good for Conor. Because Father Time and the evolution of the game, fighters are only getting better. The younger fighters today, the fighters that are running around that are 8-0 and are 21 years old, getting their debut fights on the UFC, they would murder the guys 15 years ago who were 8-0 getting their debut fight on the UFC. It's a whole different game. The people that Conor might be fighting now are people that watched Conor and built his style into theirs and found even better approaches. Does that make sense? So the longer they wait, I think the worse it is for Conor. But Conor doesn't really have a choice unless he retains that value. If there's $250 million brought on the table, I think the UFC would be willing to have that conversation with whoever would be offering the $250 million. So I think a possible route is Conor doesn't fight in the UFC again, but utilizes the UFC. And utilize might not be the right word to use. Is still capable to do a lot of fighters need to get out of their UFC contracts so they can go and do like celebrity boxing or compete in another organization or whatever it is. Their UFC contract locks them into where they can only do UFC stuff. Conor is the only person to negotiate a fight with the UFC while being under UFC contract. Conor's the only person to negotiate a fight outside of the UFC while being under UFC contract, is what I meant to say. And that was with Floyd. And Dana and the UFC were involved in that negotiation. As compared to like Darren Till. Darren Till got released, so he's able to go do all that stuff. That's what Nick Diaz has going on right now. Same thing Nate Diaz did. Nate Diaz worked out his contract so he could go do the boxing and everything. if Conor retained his value, say Conor doesn't come back to the UFC and doesn't lose in the UFC again, and he goes and boxes Logan Paul, well, he's probably going to beat Logan Paul. So he would retain his arbitrary value, if that makes sense. So then it's like, why not try to fight Jake Paul for $250 million? And the UFC would let him. You know what I'm saying? Like the UFC would, there would be enough money there to make the UFC interested in having that conversation. So I end it with this. Do you think Conor should fight in the UFC again if you were Conor? Let me know what you think.